Hello, writers. Come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my channel, Write with Michaela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Excuse me. Today is Friday, which is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. If you are writing with me and wish to exchange chapters, then send your chapter with written permission to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. I will post the email address at the end of the video. I am looking forward to reading your chapters, even if I can't read them all on the channel. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. This story is PG-13, so if you are under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. This story is in its rough draft stage, just as the last two stories we heard. The title of this story is Elloni's Pride, and today we are reading Chapter 2 out of Book 1. If you would like to read along, then send to the email I stated earlier and request a PDF of the chapter. Make sure you're specific about either City of the Ancients, Tahia, or Elloni's Pride, Breaking Point, and which chapter. Now, let's start. Elloni's Pride. This is out of Book 1. The subtitle is Breaking Point. This is Chapter 2. The next two linkers. In Underwood Village, excuse me. In Underwood Village, on the east side of the village, in the gray of dawn, before the sun rose, Brummond's mother used her little strength to push the table off the cellar door, and she opened the door. The loud squeaking made her nervous. She leaned over the hole and called down, "Brummond, you down there?" After a few minutes, she heard a reply, "Yeah." "Them soldiers took your pa last night. They took him to the mines. I know can protect you. You have to go." She tossed down a bundle of food that she put together. "There's you some food." Brummond wasn't expecting anything, so the bundle hit him in the head and on the shoulder. He grunted in pain. "What else did your pa say you needed?" Brummond thought quickly. A rope and a stone and a knife." Next, the rope came tumbling down on his head, so he decided to stand more to the side. After the woman closed the door, he would feel around for whatever she tossed down. "Stone. Did you mean a wet stone or a stone to start a fire?" she called down. Both," said Brummond hurriedly. Then he didn't see ahead in the hole for a long time. He gathered up the rope and coiled it up. He tossed it over one shoulder and under his other arm. He was beginning to think the woman wasn't returning. He wasn't sure who she was. His pa referred to his ma often, but he had never met his mom that he was aware of, so wasn't sure if this was her or not. Finally, the woman returned and tossed some things down. "There's both types of stones. You're lucky 'cause we had two sets, 'cause I still need stones here. What else did you need?" "A knife," called Brummond. "Oh, yeah." In a few minutes, she tossed down the knife. "Now you get. The sun ain't up yet. Don't let anyone see you. You need to be long way away before those dogs come back tonight." Then the door thudded closed. Brummond found a small opening in the bundle, so he stuffed the stones inside, and then he tucked the knife, which thankfully had a leather sheath, into the rope that tied on his pants. And he headed down the tunnel that led out. He had used the tunnel many times and had slipped out many times. Usually he slipped out after the dogs left and were gone several hours. Then he would return in the gray of dawn before people got up, or at least before they went out of their homes. He wasn't sure why he returned, except that he got food tossed down to him most every day. Last night he hadn't left. Something hadn't seemed right with the dog's visit. Perhaps it was the two screams instead of just one or none. Perhaps it was that he knew that the moon wasn't quite full last night and should be full tonight. His pa talked about the moon often and how the full moon brought the soldiers. Whatever the reason, he hadn't gone into the woods last night. But now he was glad he left out and went into the woods often. It would be strange to see the woods in the light of day. He would almost feel naked in the light. But that was probably the least of his worries. Brumman thought briefly about what the woman said about the soldiers taking his pa to the mines. He wasn't sure what that meant. He made it to the end of the tunnel, climbed up, and peered out in the gray light. Then he quickly headed through the tall grasses of the valley to the trees. Once he got to the trees, there would be a slight incline, but he would feel better once he got up the hill inside the trees. He wanted to be there before the sun rose. Brumman got his wish and crested the hill as the sun rose in the sky. He didn't know anything about direction, and he didn't really know where he was. And he didn't know I am sorry. Let me start this paragraph again. Brumman got his wish and crested the hill as the sun rose in the sky. He didn't know anything about direction, and he didn't really know he was supposed to find a dragon. He just knew that his pa had hit him because the king feared him or some something or other. So he just walked along the crest towards the north. After a little time, he heard a whistle, and he froze. His heart gripped him tightly in his chest. Then he saw another boy peer out of a bush, look around, and then motion to him. Brumman went to draw his knife. "You don't need your knife, for crying out loud," said the boy. Brumman looked around and then crawled under the bush. "I know you're not supposed to trust anyone, but you've got to trust someone. I'm Bradley. I live next door to you, and I've seen you exit the tunnel or return many times. I know you're a linker, and you're supposed to find your dragon." "Dragon?" asked Brumman. Bradley grabbed his wrist and rubbed his forearm. "Yes, the symbol will appear when your dragon is hatching." As Bradley said that, the symbol lit up, and both boys stared at it amazed. "Wow, you're late. Anyway, I have clothes for you. I'm a little taller, but mine should fit you all right. You'll have to roll them up or something. I also have a cloak. In a month or two, it'll get cold, and you can't run around in rags." Bradley glanced down to the boy's feet that had bark strapped on. But he didn't have shoes for the boy, so he didn't say anything about that. "There's a little food wrapped in the cloak." Brumman stared at Bradley. "Why would you do that? Why would you give me clothes?" "Look, 2 years ago, those soldiers killed my sister because they thought she had a symbol, when what really happened was she fell, received a scrape, and had a scar. What they do just isn't right. My sister did nothing to them. I would gladly go with you if I could." "I wouldn't mind," stated Brumman. "Yeah, except if I'm not there when they count children, they may kill my parents, like they killed 2 people last night," stated Bradley. "I'll do what I can," stated Brumman. "I'm no hero, but maybe with the help of a dragon, I can do something. Thanks for the clothes." "Sure thing," said Bradley. "I need to get back." Brumman nodded, and Bradley slipped out of the bush and down the hill. Brumman wondered if he would ever see Bradley again. He thought of how nice it would be to have someone come with him. Brumman rubbed his arm and stared at the symbol. After a few more minutes, the light faded, but the symbol looked tattooed on him, although he didn't know what a tattoo was. He just saw the black marks. Then he raised his makeshift pant leg and looked at the place where he had gotten a scrape and saw the red squiggly line. He knew the two weren't even close in how they looked, so he thought the soldiers were stupid to think they were the same. He didn't think that the soldiers might not know what to look for. Brumman changed to the boy's clothes, which were real clothes and not rags. He did have to roll up the legs of the pants a couple of turns, but it didn't bother him. Brumman thought of leaving his rags behind. But his pa had told him not to leave things behind because the dogs would smell them and then find him. So he wrapped the rags around his bundle after he stuffed the few vegetables inside, and then he wrapped the cloak around that, and he once again headed north. Libya was still moving north in the river. The river wasn't too deep. It was only up to her knees, but the current was strong against her legs. The gray of dawn easily filtered down to the water, but then as Libya walked, the symbol again glowed beneath her wrap. Libya stopped and looked around. She didn't know what the glow meant, and she hoped no soldiers were near. Lydia decided that the glow was letting her know that she was going the right way and she would find her dragon. She once again moved north in the river. Soflin had watched the exchange between Bradley and Broman, so she knew the universe was helping in its own way. There was something about Bradley that she hadn't sensed before. Broman was on his way towards his dragon, and thanks to Bradley, he knew about the dragon. So Soflin decided to just cast the new charm on Broman. After she cast charms to erase his scent and tracks, and then she headed to her place. She wanted to read about the possibilities for Bradley, or what he was. Then she realized she should cast a charm on Bradley as well, so she would know where he was and how he was doing. She cast all the necessary charms and then headed to her home that was south of the village and underground. She had magically created her home decades ago, and because of the magic, she didn't have to worry about the water getting inside. Jarson and his wife got up. He stoked the fire so she could warm the little soup they had left over and would eat for breakfast. It was still gray outside, so Kosher, the oldest son, turned up the oil lamp, and Kala, the oldest daughter, took a long, thin stick and caught the end on fire. She would light the candles. Excuse me. I wish, started Jarson. She left, stated Lydia. Jarson turned to his daughter. How do you know? Lydia shrugged her shoulders. I just do. Jarson glanced at his wife. His immediate thoughts were that somehow Lydia was able to link with her twin. He looked back at Lydia and then glanced around to all the children. All were listening to the conversation except the youngest two. Do you know where she is? He asked. He glanced down to where the rug had flipped up the night before. Not really, replied Lydia. She held out her arms. My arms are tired and my feet feel wet, and I heard the dogs barking and howling all night last night. I couldn't rest. I wanted to find a tree, but trees are all around me. Jarson and his wife felt a sense of relief. They would know about Libya. They glanced at Lydia and then back to each other. We should, started the mother. I agree, replied Jarson, as he looked at the oldest two children. We will help, said Kosher. Yes, said Kala. We can finish before the sun completes its rising. Quickly and quietly, Jarson and the oldest son lifted the table off the cellar door. They were going to make all the crates and sacks in the tunnel tumble to the middle, especially closer to the house, so if the soldiers found it, they wouldn't be able to easily access the tunnel and would hopefully believe they didn't use it. The mother swung the hook with the large kettle out from the fire. Today they wouldn't eat breakfast. The three oldest children swiftly went down in the cellar, and the two oldest worked at tipping barrels over so they could roll them. The third oldest helped the father lift crates and bring them forward. Several times, Jarson would help the older two by putting the barrel upright and then shifting it closer to the pile. What about me? Asked Lydia. You make sure there's no food or dishes or clothes in the chamber, Jarson told her. Lydia ran down the tunnel to gather what evidence she could, and Jarson followed her. He wanted to believe Lydia, and at the same time, he wanted to make sure Libya was truly not there. Lydia gathered a plate and a fork and a cup after she scooped the blanket on her arm. "The blanket's not," started Jarson. "It smells like her," stated Lydia as she put her nose down to it and smelled it again. Jarson motioned her on. After a few seconds, he called, "Hey, Lydia." Lydia turned back. "Thanks for the news this morning, and please tell us anything you can whenever you can." "Okay, Pa. Right now I feel something isn't right, but I don't know what it is. I don't think it's with Sis." Jarson nodded, and Lydia continued. Finally, the children climbed out, and Jarson piled things up as much as he could. Then he took a hammer and bashed a few barrels and crates so that the stores spilled out. Jarson climbed the pile instead of using the ladder that was behind their pile, and he came into the house. The family set everything right, and Lydia put Libya's blanket with hers. Then they headed out for their morning chores. Hector was out of his house very early, and he had started digging one of the two graves in the small communal graveyard. He didn't know whom the soldiers killed, but he would know soon enough. Trenton was by his father's side, and he helped dig. He had walked back with his father when they knew people would be coming outside. Once the people started coming out of their homes, Hector was back in the center of the village near the garden, and he was counting. 4 men were missing, and 2 children. He went to the families of the children first, and offered to help with the burial of their children. Both families gratefully accepted. Aldemnia watched Hector, and she glanced at her mother. She knew her mother felt for the families. She said, "Ma, Kinsesny and I know what to do. You don't have to walk us to the garden. Just take Talta back inside." Vixie, Aldemna's mother, replied, "No, the fresh air is good for Talta. Besides, I'm not walking you to the garden. We're going to the graveyard to visit your grandmother and sister Shimri first." Aldemnia just nodded and followed her mother. She knew that her mother would offer condolences to the families as well. Neither Trenton nor Hector saw Bradley leave or return to the village, nor did they see Broman. Bradley had known that he had wanted to get the Linkers out, so he had gone to stash the bundle under the bush, and then he had heard someone. Thankfully, it was a Linker, and he was able to give the bundle to the Linker. Now he would need to put something together for the next Linker. He just hoped he would get to pass the next bundle to the next Linker, but it was already light outside, so he wasn't sure when or how. Elloni felt the light from the sun hit her closed lids. She slowly opened her eyes and saw white rocks on the ground and a lot of trees. Elloni hatched with some knowledge and had some from the gray light in the orb, but everything wasn't in place yet. So she just admired the beauty before her without knowing the names, rocks and trees, or knowing the colors white and green. Elloni felt a pull within herself towards the northeast, but she wasn't sure why, and she remembered the message from the orb. She swung her head back and looked in the cave, which was still dark. She wished she could bring the message ball with her, but she didn't know how. She turned back and stood up at the entrance to the cave. If anyone had been near to see her, they would have been in awe. Elloni's green scales glimmered in the sun. On her back, her scales were a darker green, and as they went towards her stomach, they were lighter and lighter green. Several scales had a golden edge, so that the gold made the scales distinctly outlined. She had 2 long whiskers, one off each side of her lower jaw, near the rear of her jaw. The long, thick whiskers started off dark green and grew lighter green to white, but the thin tips tapered off with gold. Her thinness made her look elegant, and at a certain angle, her 2 horns looked as though her lower jawbone just kept extending up. But the horns were firmly set on the top of her head, and their twisting curvature added to her elegance. Elloni stepped out of the cave and looked down. The sharp rocks were not hurting her, but she felt a definite difference between the smooth cave floor and the bumpy rocks. As she walked farther out of the cave, she felt the warmth of the sun hit her scales, and she wanted to bask in it. Elloni decided that she could get some rays of sun while she explored, so she looked around carefully to get her bearings and to memorize the place. Although all her knowledge wasn't in place, some things were. Thus, right now, she reasoned that however long her egg had been here, the place was safe for the egg. Therefore, this was somewhere she needed to return. She didn't know anything about charms, or the possibility that someone had placed a charm over the cave entrance. Elloni entered the trees, which her slim form allowed, and she instinctively grabbed some leaves with her mouth and pulled the leaves off the branches. She started chewing and realized that she was hungry. She continued walking and eating and taking in all the scene around her. In a cave northeast of Broman was another egg. The egg cracked a little and then was still. After a while more, it cracked a little more. Once the sun was slightly spilling in the cave, the egg hatched. The dark red dragon raised its sleepy head and sneezed. The copper orb rolled across the floor from the wind of his sneeze. Hagar stared at the orb and wondered about it, and then he hiccuped, and flames came out of his mouth. The flames hit the button, and the holographed message started displaying. Since the ball had rolled, the message was displaying sideways on the cavern wall instead of upright on the floor. The dragon in the message scared Hagar, so he opened his mouth to breathe fire again. This time, his flame was strong at first, and then went out. And the message played on. The small stream of gray light hung in the air and didn't go to Hagar, and Hagar didn't really notice it. Once the message stopped, Hagar slowly approached the copper ball, and he pawed at it. The ball rolled some more and played the message. This time the message was upside down and on the floor. Hagar had passed through the gray light when he approached the ball, so the gray light went to him and seeped into him. Hagar pounced on the ball, only for the ball to spin away and play the message again. Hagar didn't have all the starting knowledge that Elloni had, so the message didn't make much sense to him, but the word Hagar had a certain ring to it. Of course, Elloni had slept after she hatched and after she received the gray light, so additional information had more time to open to her as well, and Hagar's information would open over time. After a little while, the ball was boring to Hagar, so he decided to explore what was making the light that entered his cave. He exited and saw trees everywhere. He wasn't sure what they were, so he tried to bite one. The leaves tasted good, so he bit another, and then another. Libya had walked in the water for quite a while. The water soaked through her shoes as it did the bottom foot of her dress. Then suddenly she stepped and went down in the water to her waist, and she fell forward. Libya panicked and started flailing, but after a few seconds she stood once again and quickly grabbed up her bundle. She looked at the western shore, and she looked behind herself. She wasn't sure how far she had walked in the water, but she was too scared to continue in it, so she headed for the shore. The trees were on a steep incline, and Libya just wanted to climb a tree, but she didn't want to be at the edge. She felt too exposed, so she climbed the incline and then climbed a tree. As Libya climbed, she remembered the times she was in the village and her twin sister was in the cellar in her place. She remembered climbing trees and swinging in swings and playing with a ball. She smiled as she remembered. But then she felt sad. and missed her sister and her family. She was grateful to have a sister to take her place and let her have all the experiences of being out. She didn't know how she would climb a tree now if she hadn't ever done it before. Still, Libya was tired and wet, and climbing wasn't easy. But she climbed up to a place that looked mostly enclosed with branches on several sides of her, so she hoped she didn't fall out as she slept. Libya leaned over and looked down. She wasn't too high up, but she was high enough that she felt that a fall would hurt her. Just she wouldn't die. Once Bradley got back to the village, he started his choice of helping with the village garden, and he didn't really pay too much attention to the 4 missing males or that Hector and Trenton weren't there as early as normal. Every once in a while, his pa noticed him putting a carrot or a potato in a pile of weeds, and he would carry them out of the garden. So at one point, the father casually followed his son, and he saw him hiding the vegetables in a woodpile behind some houses. Bradley's father, Hushman, stepped on a stick, and it cracked beneath his foot. Bradley jerked around, startled. "Oh, Pa, I can explain." Hushman put a finger to his lips, and he glanced around and then whispered, "I'm smart enough to figure things out. Are all 3 out of here? How far are they? They must not be far if..." Bradley shook his head. He whispered, "Only the older boy, not the younger one. I don't know about the girl. I've never found her exit, and..." He looked around and lowered his voice. "I'm not sure about her. Sometimes I have stronger feelings than other times." Hushman nodded as he thought, "I think you need to widen your search to find her tunnel, but just help the boys. Then we will worry about the girl." And Bradley looked around and then whispered, "The older boy didn't even have shoes." He looked around again. "I have a really bad feeling about the full moon tonight." Hushman nodded again. You're not the only one. So get back to work, and I'll try to add leather to the stash. And then you get the younger one out." "But they count." Hushman held up his hand. "Like I said, you're not the only one. I have a really bad feeling too. If you can get him out and get back, okay. If not, just help him however you can." Hushman nervously glanced around. They usually only said such things in their cellar when it was raining. They have to survive. We need them." Bradley nodded and then headed back to his chores. Broman couldn't really see where he put his feet because he held the bundle before him. His arms were getting tired, and he was thinking of how he could tie the things on him so he could just walk. Then he stepped in something, and a bad odor hit his nose. Broman sighed, and he set the bundle down to the side to look at how badly the poop covered the bark tied on his feet. And it wasn't too badly. Broman didn't usually see tracks of poop. He sometimes would see the animals too. He normally accidentally stepped in the poop and then felt the ground. If the moon was good, he might see some tracks. But here was daylight. Still, Broman squatted down and looked at the prints around the poop. The prints were a bit rounded and had a split at what Broman felt was the front side. Broman looked at the poop and knew it was not the taller animal with the horns. Broman knew that animal's poop was smaller and skinnier. He tried to remember what his paw called them. Was it deer? Yes, he thought so. And this bigger poop was from an animal he didn't want to meet again. He thought his paw called this a boar. Broman remembered how angry his paw had been when he asked his questions at first because his paw realized he was getting out. But a couple of days later, his paw said that after talking with his ma, they felt it was good for him to know some things. His pa strictly told him that they would deny knowing him if the soldiers or village people ever caught him. Then within his being. Roman heard the dogs barking. He closed his eyes as he began to shake, and as his mind replayed the sounds of last night. The barking scared him tremendously, especially when the barks accompanied shrill screams. He didn't have all the vocabulary to describe his feelings, but the feelings made it hard for him to even breathe. Roman glanced around at a few more piles of poop and decided he wasn't going home, so no one would complain of the smell, and maybe the dogs wouldn't smell it. So Roman purposely stepped in a few more piles and then picked up his bundle and kept going. When he stopped to see what food he had, he would try strapping more things on. A little past mid-morning, when the village was winding down a bit to go inside and eat, Bradley took the opportunity to get the supplies he gathered, plus the leather his father had added, and go to the hole where the other leaguer was. He had never seen this boy come out, but he felt the boy was there because he heard talk several times inside when he walked near a home not too far away, and because he felt vibrations near here. There was a rock on top of the hole, so the boy would have to be strong enough to move the rock. Bradley looked around again and then moved the rock. He called down into the hole, "Hello? Anybody there?" Bradley didn't get an answer, so he set the bundle to the side and climbed in to see. He hoped it wasn't too dark inside, since he didn't have a candle or a lantern. The hole was slim, but Bradley fit easily enough. Bradley felt that a soldier probably wouldn't fit, especially with all the armor on. The hole was also like a tunnel, so Bradley pushed his back against one side and his hands and feet against the other to go down. Once he was down inside, he squatted down and let his eyes adjust to the darkness. Then he made his way down the tunnel until he found the opening to a chamber. He called in a whisper, "Hello? Where are you? I need to help you get out before the dogs come back tonight." "Are the dogs going to eat me?" came a small voice. Bradley looked towards the voice and saw a small figure curled up in the corner. He briefly thought that wasn't the best life, but he had a mission, so he shook those thoughts away. "Hopefully not, but you need to get away from here before they return. Come with me." Bradley held out his hand to the boy, and the boy came over and took it. Bradley headed out the way he came in. When he started towards the hole, the boy slightly tugged back and said, "I can't go that way." Bradley tugged. "You have to. You can't go through the house." The boy relented and let Bradley lead him. Bradley was estimating the boy's age to be half his. He was 12, so the boy would be 5 or 6. Bradley shook his head to himself. He didn't want to leave the village until after the dogs tonight. The boy needed help. When they got to the hole, the boy had a hard time climbing up, so Bradley pushed him up and up till the boy crawled out of the hole. Once Bradley got out, he told the boy to stay down and not let anyone see him. The boy was shading his eyes from the bright sun. Bradley sighed to himself once again. He glanced around, and no one seemed near. So he grabbed the boy's hand and the bundle and headed out east towards the trees. He squatted down as much as he could as he ran, so he was lower than the windows. As they moved toward the tree line, Bradley glanced down and saw this boy had no shoes at all, and he didn't have time to make any. Bradley pulled the boy along as fast as he could go. Once they were in the trees, Bradley said, "I can't go with you until after." Then he noticed the boy was trying to wipe something off his feet, and then the odor hit his nose. "Don't scrape that off yet," instructed Bradley. "That was probably dog poop from the dogs last night. If you leave it, you will smell like them." The boy looked up and looked through squinting eyes at Bradley. "Listen, I don't want my parents or brothers and sisters to die. I must go back. You take this and walk that way as far as you can. If you see more poop, then step in it. We will clean you up when I join you after the dogs leave. Okay?" The boy looked scared. What if you don't find me? I will find you, stated Bradley confidently, and your dragon will find you once he or she hatches. Take the bundle and go. Don't stop. Don't look back. What if the soldiers find me? They won't, unless you stop, stated Bradley. But I have a bad feeling about tonight, and think if you stayed, they would find you in the village like I did. I will put the rock back that covered your hole. You go. Step and poop, and keep walking. Go in a straight line up the hill. I will find you after the dogs leave. Bradley slightly pushed the boy the direction he needed to go. The boy started walking, and after a few steps he looked back. Don't look back, restated Bradley urgently. Go! The boy turned and started walking again. Bradley felt very sad. He didn't want to leave the boy alone. But he knew, too, if the soldiers didn't count him tonight, the soldiers just might send the dogs in the surrounding woods to find him, and they would find the older boy and the younger one. Then he thought, he didn't know either boy's name, but then thought that was good. Bradley headed back to the village. He would replace the stone and then slip in his house to eat a quick bite. Hector was more tired than hungry, so instead of eating lunch, he fell into bed. Trenton was glad because he wanted to sleep a little, too. Digging graves was hard work, and all the sadness around the death of the children weighed on everyone there. Trenton could remember the smiles on the one little girl's face when she was sitting near Trenton, and he handed her a strawberry. She was so little, but she had a few teeth, so Trenton thought she could eat the berry. He took another berry and showed her how to bite it. Then, when she did, juice had squirted, and she had giggled. Now she was gone. Trenton had no words to give the mother, so he just busied himself with digging. Aldemia thought she would feel better when they came in for lunch. But at the graveyard she had spoken to her grandmother in her mind. She told her grandmother over and over that she had died too soon, and she needed her to come back and talk to her mother. Before she had walked away from her grandmother's grave, she thought to her, I need more prayers. I need some prayers to help me get my mother to leave this village. We are not safe here. Please help me get out of here. Now that she was at home, the same prayer that she always recited was pounding in her head and her memory. The prayer was so loud that Aldemnia almost thought she heard the words with her ears. Soflin was reading a passage in a book. When her magic alerted her, she realized that it was from Bradley. She didn't know what to expect when she had cast a charm on him, but now she had strong feelings of anxiousness. She didn't think the soldiers would come during the day, but she went to her cauldron and cast the charms to see the village. Everything was quiet, as it should be at this hour. Everyone was eating or resting in their homes. Then Soflin saw Bradley hurrying to his home, saw him slip inside. He had been careful not to let the door make any noise. Soflin watched inside the house and saw Hoshman look at his son, and saw Bradley slightly nod his head. Soflin immediately knew that Hoshman knew that Bradley had helped Broman. But then she thought, that was earlier today. Is this the first they're communicating? Why is Bradley so anxious now? Soflin scanned the other homes. When she got to Coulter's home, she didn't see him eating with his parents. Granted, they didn't let him out every day, and after last night's scare, they might not let him up today. But seeing in the chamber was harder, as there was usually no light of any kind. Soflin looked in for several minutes and couldn't see him. Then she suddenly felt the charm she had on him loosening and letting him go. She quickly set a different charm to find Coulter before her charm was completely gone. She couldn't lose him. Her heartbeat quickened as it was taking time. Her charms for the Linkers covered the village and into the tree line of the woods. In the past, she had to expand her original charm because Broman often went into the woods. She thanked the stars now that she had expanded it. Then she saw Coulter. The small boy held a bundle in front of himself as he walked up a hill between the trees. The bundle looked very big for the boy, but she knew it wasn't too big of a bundle. Then she saw Coulter trip and fall forward. He got up quickly and looked around. Soflin could see his fear, but she decided to use this time to cast the new charm to keep track of him. She hoped she could cast this charm through the cauldron, but she didn't know. Usually you had to be in close proximity to someone to cast a charm on them. At least that was her perception. She watched Coulter bend and pick up his bundle and start walking up the hill. 1 or 2 more trees and Coulter would be out of her area charm. She waited to see if the new charm worked. After a few minutes, she felt Coulter exit her area, but she also felt she could find him. Soflin shook her head to herself. Coulter shouldn't have left yet, so she wondered what spurred him on. Then she thought Bradley was the reason. Why would Bradley try to get Coulter to leave? Coulter couldn't survive very long on his own in the woods. She couldn't imagine why Bradley would do that. She thought about thinking with him to learn what she could, but since he was around his family, she decided not to. She did cast charms to erase Coulter's tracks, trail, and scent to her protection line, just as she had with Libya and Broman. Okay, writers, that is the end of chapter 2. 2 more linkers are out of the village, and another dragon has hatched. So far, we know that the soldiers visit every full moon, and tonight is the full moon. Leave a comment below on if you were Broman's mom. Would you have sent Broman out because they took your husband to the mines? Or would you have gone on with things as they were? Leave a comment on poor little Coulter. If you were Coulter, would you obey Bradley and head out of the village? Or would you try to circle back to your home? I mean, think about it. Coulter doesn't even know which home. He's been inside, but he's not allowed to go out in the village. He's allowed to come up from the cellar into the home to see his parents. But if he went back, he wouldn't know which house was his. And also, there's a mistake in the writing so far, because if Soflin had it out to a certain area, her charm, and Broman crested the hill, that's not his area yet. His area is still farther. So I shouldn't still have Coulter going up the hill. I will have to edit that and fix that, because the hill had to stop where Broman crested it, and then Coulter should be walking on, and there shouldn't really be a hill past that. So I will edit that and fix that. That's why I tell you this is a rough draft, and we're getting to hear rough. So hopefully you can, read your stories and you know that, okay, it's a rough draft, but I can fix this, I can edit this, no problem. Join me Tuesday for some more jargon, vocabulary, or another writing prompt. And leave a comment on what you prefer. Do you want more writing prompts like we did with the alien on Tuesday? Do you like the vocabulary where I tell you different words and we try to, that might describe a character like erudite or something, very smart, book learned. Words that might describe your characters or the jargon. I know after a while we kind of run out of jargon: protagonist, antagonist, plot, setting, genres. There's only so many of those words, but if you have some jargon that you want me to do or some vocabulary you want me to do, great. If you want me to just give you writing prompts, then let me know that. If you like the mix that I've done, then leave that in the comment too. Join me Friday for Elloni's Pride, Chapter 3, Full Moon. And based on the chapter, y'all should already know that something happened, the soldiers visit during the full moon. So you kind of know what's going to happen with this full moon because the soldiers are going to visit. So it kind of gives you a pre-hint or a little foreshadowing for them. Visit my website, bymykella.com, and read some character bios. Leave a comment below on which characters on the website are your favorites so far. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and hit the bell so we can continue to write together. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykella with Write with Mykella. Bye for now.